We are pleased to bring you today's webinar, Beyond the Stage, the Power of Speaker Support and Management for Event Success. Thank you for being here. My name is Amanda Law, and I am the Event Marketing Manager here at Cadmium. I am very excited today to welcome you to our webinar, but also to our speaker. She is a globally recognized powerhouse in the world of public speaking and events. She is an award-winning keynote speaker, a public speaking coach, and the inspiring host of Dare to Interrupt, a podcast that focuses on empowering women in the events industry. With over 12 years of experience, Courtney has led impactful conversations that have helped professionals, entrepreneurs, and organizations tap into their true potential. Courtney's passion and expertise have earned her significant recognition, including being the youngest person ever elected to be a member on the International Board of Directors for Meeting Professionals International. So, International Board for MPI. She's also a Meetings Mean Business Ambassador. And as if that's not enough, she is widely regarded as one of the most influential change makers in the event and hospitality industry. Y'all, I'm so excited. Okay, so today, Courtney will be sharing her wealth of knowledge and insights with us, and we couldn't be more excited, of course, to hear from her. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the incredible Courtney Stanley. To you, Courtney.
Hello, hello. Yay, it's so good to be here. I'm super excited to be speaking to all of you today. This is actually my last gig of 2024. So I think we're all in a place now where we are furiously wrapping up the year and getting ready for 2025. So I couldn't be more excited to be here with you all for this last gig. Thank you so much, Amanda, for the introduction. I have to say, I always blush a little bit during my bio. They're all very kind words, and I appreciate you so much. So you've all heard a little bit about me. I would love to just see who's here today. So you've got the chat box, throw in the chat box what you're up to for the holidays, anything you're looking forward to, and of course, where you're joining us from. I'd love to see the global span of our audience today. Now, like Amanda said, I am a keynote speaker, so I actually focus on leadership development for leaders at all levels. My focus is really teaching other leaders how to develop necessary and sought after modern leadership skills that are most critical in today's world, which include things like empathy, vulnerability, and self-awareness. A lot of my keynotes and workshops lean on facilitating vulnerable communication experiences to really connect people to themselves and also to others in a way that's more human-centered so that they can take those things back and apply them to their teams and hopefully build deeper trust and more meaningful relationships. I am also a public speaking coach. So I help people prepare their presentations. I help them feel more confident and just more ready to be on stage and really own that moment and drop the mic when the moment calls for it. So that's something that I really enjoy doing too. However, before I got into this work full time, I actually started out in our industry. So I studied hospitality and event management. I used to be a third-party planner. I switched sides of the fence and I went and worked for a technology supplier in the events industry as well. And so I learned a lot about experience design, the behind the scenes planning. Being a planner myself, I know the difficulties, the trials, the tribulations that come with the job, also the stress. So hopefully you've got some time to relax plan this holiday season. But I also learned a lot about audience engagement, being on the event tech side. So this type of blended background is really, really helpful in our conversation today, because I'm not just coming to you as a full-time speaker. And I started my business at the beginning of 2020 as a full-time speaker, and I'm happy to share that I'm going into year 6 now. I survived that crazy, crazy time. Along the way, learned a lot about virtual, about hybrid, about, of course, taking the stage in person. But that experience blended with my background in planning and also in event technology supplier, that's given me a really interesting and unique perspective to be able to share knowledge from different corners of our industry and to help you all be in a position where you feel like you're working with speakers in the best way possible, where you're really maximizing that opportunity. So that said, We're going to get into some really, really exciting information today. I see that some of you dropped where you're coming from, and lots of people on the East Coast. So we see you, East Coast friends, lots of other people from, looks like in the Midwest as well, which is great. I'm based in Detroit. Before we get into anything, I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. So you see this QR code up here on the screen. We all know how to use this bad boy here. So go ahead and just scan it. I'll give you a second to do so. I'll share it with you at the end as well. Don't forget to actually hit connect when it takes you to my LinkedIn profile page. Otherwise, it just looks like you are stalking me, which is fine. That's totally cool. But I would love to be able to stay in touch with you after today's session as well. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. The first question that I want to go through with you all today, and again, if you have questions, please use that Q&A feature and we'll go through the questions at the end. But I want to talk a little bit about the pre-event side. So how do you actually choose the right speaker? That's where we're going to start today. And there are a few different things that I'm going to share with you that I think is going to make it easier for you to make sure that you're selecting the right person and that you're investing in the right person. I certainly understand that speakers can be a very large line item in the budget. And I have heard time and time again, and also experienced in my own world, that sometimes speakers don't meet our expectations, especially when we're investing a lot of dollars in them. So we want to make sure that we're actually picking the right person. So in order to do that, I'm going to walk you through 5 different tips and tricks to be able to make sure you get that right person on stage. The first being that we need to talk about your stakeholders. So when I say the word stakeholders, I want you to just think of the first people or titles that come to mind. Feel free to drop them in the chat box. Some of you might be thinking things like, clearly, my boss is a stakeholder. The CEO, maybe the CMO. These are all people who are stakeholders within our organization. They're the people I'm reporting to at the end of the day, and they all have their own opinions of what this experience at the conference should be like. I want to encourage you to consider those stakeholders, but also think about the other stakeholders that you have, which are your members. It's your customers. It's the people who are actually coming to the event, whether it's an employee event, it's a customer event, you work for an association, you've got your members that are actually paying to be part of this experience and then paying to come to the conference as well. Those are your stakeholders as well. So asking yourself the question, what are my stakeholders looking for? So if they were to define a successful experience, what are those things? Chances are your executive team that you're reporting to and your audience members, they might be looking for different things. So it's important to sit down beforehand, before you even think about who you're going to bring in to be your keynote, whether it's opening, closing, you've got workshop speakers, you've got sessions happening. What exactly are the objectives that you're trying to meet? Now, as a speaker, this is really, really important for me and for other speakers to understand too, because all we want to do is make you happy. We want to make your audience happy. We want to make your stakeholders happy. We want you to rave about us when we're done. So understanding what those objectives are, and feel free to drop those in the chat too. What are the most important things that your audience experiences, or that your CEO, your executive team, that they see happening on site at the event? And this doesn't necessarily have to just do with the speaker. These are overall strategic objectives. Now, another way that I want to encourage you to think about choosing the right speaker is asking around. I will tell you that probably 80% of my business, of my leads that come to my business to book me as a speaker, come from word of mouth. So people in our community are very close-knit. We know that it's a very relational community. So we're always talking, we're always sharing, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's anything in between. So start asking. If you're looking for specific topics, if you're trying to meet these specific objectives, start asking your community. Post on LinkedIn. Ask if anybody has recommendations. People will start tagging speakers like crazy. I've gotten tagged in LinkedIn posts every now and then as well, where they're trying to refer people that they love, that they know, that they've seen, that they would highly recommend and put forward and put their name behind. So asking for referrals is a really, really, really powerful way to get a testimony from somebody that you trust, so that you're not blindly bringing somebody in. That said, it's also really important to do a little bit of homework. So when you have this short list of speakers that have been recommended to you, or that you're looking through, maybe a speakers bureau has recommended them as well, start looking into their marketing materials. Of course, we have their speaker sizzle reel, we've got their highlights video. which is great. And it can showcase some really important things. But what I want to communicate and hope that you understand is that a video like that, a sizzle reel, is extremely well produced most times. So you're getting their best moments. They're taking snippets from their presentations that were, the audience is laughing, or it was, a line that somebody would use in a social media caption. So it's going to give you the best of the best, and it may not actually give you a real clear understanding of how the speaker is going to be on stage for 30, 45, an hour, sometimes even more. So my recommendation to you is to go a little bit deeper. Go to their social media channels, see what type of content they're posting, watch some of their stories, see how they are on camera. But then I would also recommend that if they have a longer version of a presentation, you don't have to watch the whole thing, but just skip through the video in a few different places to be able to really see how their energy ebbs and flows on stage, what the audience is really doing in those 60 minutes, and then take it a step further. Get them on a video call. So I know that a lot of speakers have agents, especially if they're working for speaker bureaus. So they may have somebody that's representing them, which is okay. My preference as a speaker is to get on the call with the client right away to be able to actually hear them, understand them clearly, what they're looking for, their objectives, those types of things. But it also gives them a chance to see who I am, to feel my energy, to understand, whether the video they watched that was a minute and a half is representative of who they're actually having a conversation with. When you get on that video call, my recommendation is to interview them a little bit, have some prepared questions. And what I want to do with you is I want to take you through some of those questions that you should be prepared to ask your speaker on that initial discovery call, but also to have the right information prepared for the speaker, because we have questions too. Again, our objective being we want to do the best job possible for you and your stakeholders. So that said, these slides will be shared with you within the next 48 hours. So don't worry about taking screenshots or photos. If you want to, feel free, no big deal. But these points here are really, really helpful questions and information that you should have prepared to either share or ask during that video interview that you're having with the speaker. So for you, for the planner, what I would expect as a speaker and what I would hope for as a speaker, this is the ideal conversation to have, is I'm going to be wondering about the conference details, of course, date, time, and sometimes I know we don't all have that information together, but the more information you can provide, the better, especially if you're looking for a certain length of session. Any of those details are important and helpful to us when we curate the content. So yes, the conference details, of course, the logistics, the location, all of that. But also, what is the theme for this year? Why does this theme exist this year? What was the theme last year? Why did it change to this one? Adding any sort of context is helpful for me to understand the why behind the theme. Hearing a tagline for a conference is helpful. That adds some color to the picture that we're trying to create as a team. But understanding the why behind the theme and where the organization is trying to move in the future is even more helpful to me. So starting off there is a great place. Second to that, I would say, is sharing those stakeholder objectives. So once you've done the work with your team, you've gone through and you've identified these are the top 3 strategic objectives for the conference. And maybe additionally, these are the top 3 that we have for our opening or closing keynote session or the workshops that we're hosting. That is going to be incredibly helpful for me and for any speaker that will customize their content to make it a part of your program instead of just an add-on to your program. It's also really, really helpful for speakers to know the number of attendees. And again, I know that it could be a range. You're hoping for more at this next conference. I'm sure you're always trying to grow, but it's helpful to have a little bit of that range. The reason why speakers want to know this is because the way that I deliver a presentation for, let's say, a group of 60, if it's a very intimate executive leadership conference or summit, is going to be very different if there are 6,000 people in the room. The engagement's going to be different. My delivery is going to be different. The content is probably going to look a little bit different too. So that information is really helpful for us to have as well. In addition to that, the audience demographics. So outside of just the number of people that are going to be in the room, yes, that's important. But if you can provide any insight into the level of leadership that the majority of people are in the room, the roles that they have, the pain points that your audience may be struggling with at this point in time, that's also really helpful for me to know. Sometimes gender makes a difference in the way that speakers present as well. If you're looking for, a female to hop on stage, a woman in leadership to demonstrate different types of leadership development to a room full of women, that's probably going to be a little bit different than she would if it was a mixed group or if it was men or anybody in between. So that's something that I would say is helpful for us to know as well. Outside of the audience, if you have any topics in mind, and I'm assuming that most of you probably do, especially if you're coming into it with your objectives for your stakeholders outlined, and also having the theme identified, you're probably going to have some topics in mind too. You've searched for speakers. You generally know you kind of want to stay in this area of content. That's important for us to know too. A lot of times speakers will have more than one topic. So I may have 3 that are listed in my speaker kit. I may have a few that are listed on my website, but I may actually have a dozen or more that I've done for different companies over the years that I could easily pull out, refresh, and customize for your group. So you coming to us and sharing what topics you're looking for is more helpful a lot of the time than us coming to you and saying, well, I have these 3, is that what you're looking for? A lot of speakers will be willing to customize their content for you. Now, a couple other things on the planner side to come prepared with for this initial call with the speaker would be AV and engagement. So what audiovisual tools did you use in the past, or event tech tools did you use in the past? How did that impact your audience engagement? What's coming up for this year's conference? Again, just kind of, this is a little bit of extra information. Speakers can get away with not knowing this and just kind of rolling with the punches. But the more information that we have up front, the more we're able to customize the experience for your audience. Lastly is budget. I think money is the least preferred topic when it comes to a discovery call. We still need to talk about it. And whether it comes from the speaker or it comes from the planner, or you're just really open and you're both trying to find the right price point, it's important to have that number in mind. A lot of speakers will adjust their fee based on your budget, myself included. We have a range, you have a range. You have a top, leave a top. We have a bottom that we don't want to go below. So it is a negotiation, but we have to have a starting point. So for me as a speaker, I'm always willing to share my range or my flat fee and then go from there. But it's also helpful to have that reciprocated on the other side so that we can find a happy medium, or we can find a good place to move forward before we're off the call. So from the speaker perspective, these would be the things that I would be looking for on the perfect, most ideal call with a planner in that discovery phase. Now, on the flip side, these are the questions that I would recommend that you ask, or that you would hope that your speaker would share and you would try to pull out during that conversation. The first question being, who is your typical audience? Because there are speakers that will specialize in certain groups. So somebody might specialize in speaking to college audiences. Somebody might specialize in a more executive leadership type of environment. Somebody has spoken for everybody, and demographics can play a role here too. You might have a speaker that's consistently speaking to women, and that's her sweet spot. You might have somebody else who's really good with smaller groups that does more of a leadership executive coaching type of style, versus you might have somebody that's always doing main stage 5,000 to 10,000 people every time they speak. So asking the speaker, who is your typical audience that you speak to, or who is the ideal audience member for you, that forces us to be really transparent about what our speaking history is. And also it helps identify whether or not my best ideal audience is the audience that I'll be speaking to in your particular group. You also want to ask the speaker, what is the best length of time for the presentation that we're discussing? So if I've said, listen, I think that this keynote would be perfect for your group, I think a lot of the time we do this backwards, where on the planning side, we've got our program set, we've got time to fill, we've got space to fill. And so we're looking for a keynote speaker that's going to fill that 60 minutes, that 90 minutes, that 15 minutes, whatever it is. Honestly, from a speaker perspective, it's better for the audience and therefore your stakeholders if we start from the other side, where the question is, what is the best length of time for that keynote that you said would be a great fit for this audience? Because I know I've done this topic dozens of times. I know what works for the actual presentation for the audience. I know at what point the audience is going to start to pull back and drop off because we're humans and we only have a certain amount of attention to spend on one thing. Start there, ask them about the time. And then if you need to just kind of ask for certain things from the speaker, can we add in a little bit of workshopping here? Can we do something here to pull it out a little bit more because we've got to fill this time? That's helpful to be able to collaborate on. I would also suggest asking the speaker if they customize, because a lot of speakers do and a lot of speakers don't. There are definitely speakers that will just kind of like have their same presentation. They've got it, they know it, they're great at it, and they prefer to stay in that lane without changing too much. You've got other speakers who customize all the time. So they're constantly looking for ways to make sure that they're meeting the objectives of that particular group and that particular client, and they're used to making those changes. So it's a little bit of a level of comfort, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but you do want to be able to have that opportunity to have that conversation and see, is there any wiggle room in the creativity of this presentation, the content of this experience, so that we can make sure that we're getting exactly what we want. I will also say that it's helpful to ask a speaker whether there are pre-event and post-event engagement opportunities. So, for example, is there prep work that our audience can be doing before they get into the room so that they're already in a particular mindset, they're already familiar with certain concepts, and likewise, for the end of the event, is there something that you can give them to continue to do this work? Or is there an asset that you can provide to them that they can take back to their team so that their team continues to benefit from what their leader has learned in this particular training? A lot of speakers will already have these assets ready and may customize them for you. And a lot of speakers would be willing to do it for you. So if they've never done it before, that's something that they can work on and create for your group. A couple other things I want to talk about before we get past this particular discovery call and some tips to make sure this is the best interview possible to get the best speaker in your event would be promotion. A lot of speakers are willing and happy to provide promotional assets for you. So whether that's recording a video, whether that's sharing on social media, those are things that you can ask to maximize the time that you're asking for from your speaker. They're happy to do it too. They want people hyped up. They want people excited to be there. They want people to know what to expect when they walk into the room. So what can you get out of your speaker if you ask the question, do you do any sort of promotion for you? This also may be a tipping point if you're looking at certain speakers, and some speakers are willing to do a little bit more promotion. Some speakers are willing to do a little bit more customization, and you won't know that if you don't ask. And a lot of times speakers won't necessarily think to have that conversation in that first discovery call. That might be a later conversation. Definitely worth exploring. Last couple of things here. Similar to the planner points, a speaker also needs to be able to share with you what their expectations are for AV, and also if there are certain tools that need to be purchased or that the audience would benefit from if they were purchased in order to make it a more engaging experience. There are lots of fun, creative things that speakers are doing these days to make it a really memorable moment. So what can we do together? Are there any creative ideas that you have that I haven't seen before coming from the speaker perspective? And then lastly, speaker fee. Every speaker knows this question is coming on every single call, definitely during the discovery call. What does it cost to have you at this particular event? So they should have that number prepared for you unless it's something that's completely custom, but that's a conversation that should happen right off the bat as well. And I beg of you, my planner friends, have the conversation about money, and please know that it is almost always negotiable from definitely from the speaker side, but I also know from the planner side. So have the conversation and don't let money become a barrier to getting that perfect speaker for your event, because a lot of times we're willing to work with your budget. So let's keep cruising here because we've got lots of good stuff to go through. A couple of questions that I want to share with you in addition to those on paper best questions to be asking your speaker friends when you get on these calls. I want you to take a step back before you get on this call. And these are questions you're going to be asking yourself, not the speaker. How is it that you want your audience to feel? Because a feeling lasts a lot longer than something that is on paper and learned in the moment. The way that somebody feels, and we'll go, to Maya Angelou for this one, people are never going to forget the way that you make them feel. So looking at the speakers that you are considering, how do you think that speaker would make your audience feel? And does that align with the objectives that you've laid out? One of those objectives that I would encourage that you have laid out is, what behaviors would you like to see change in your audience? So if one of your objectives for the overall strategy for the conference is, we want to motivate our employees to make more sales, let's say it's a sales conference, what behaviors are you hoping this particular conference, including the speaker, will be able to change so that they walk out of that conference and they start to apply that change to their everyday life? And this could work for anybody, for association members, for different levels of leadership. What behaviors are you hoping to change? Will this speaker help you get to the finish line? And then the last question I want you to think about, and I'm going to ask you to just throw this in the chat. You might have read ahead a little bit, so you might have somebody in mind. If you could afford any speaker in the world, who would you book and why? The why is really, really important here. So I want to see your answers, throw them in the chat. And I want you to be thinking about your stakeholders, thinking about your audience. So not thinking about who would I want to see? Because of course, who doesn't want to see Brene Brown? Of course, I would choose Brene Brown. But does Brene meet the objectives of the stakeholders at my conference, or would somebody else meet the objectives of my conference? So asking yourself that question and then looking for those values in the speakers that you're researching and that you're starting to interview, that's going to be helpful for you to just have a good starting place of, what's the vibe? What do I want this experience to be like? And does this person match the vibe? Okay, so moving out of pre-event and into now, okay, you've booked your speaker, you know who it's going to be. You want to make sure that this is the best experience possible for our stakeholders, for our audience. How can I work with my speaker to make sure that we are making it so? I love when my clients come to me and share anything and everything about the conference. So what you're seeing here on this slide are the different elements of event design that a planner and a speaker could collaborate on together to make it the best possible experience. The first being audience layout and seating style. This matters. And the reason why you want to talk about the layout of the room with your speaker is because your speaker knows their presentation and their content inside and out. They know exactly what type of engagement activities they're going to be doing. They know if the person on the left is going to be talking to the person on the right. They know if they're going to be pulling people up on stage to share things. They know if they're going to be passing the mic to somebody in the room. So talking to your speaker and asking them, hey, I know you've done this presentation dozens of times before. I know you're customizing it for my group. How would you prefer to have the design be in this space? And it doesn't have to be that they want exactly, these seats here, but are they going to be getting up and moving? Are they going to be on stage? Are they going to be talking to each other? My experience as a speaker is that it is so much better when the layout matches the content. If I'm asking people to talk to each other at a table in a group of 4, I'm hoping that there's going to be a table with a group of 4. So starting there is really helpful. And stage design is helpful too. Some speakers have different preferences for whether they're going to be standing, whether they're going to be walking throughout the room. It may not be as important to spend a ton of money on stage design for the keynote if the keynote's going to be running up and down the aisles doing different things. So again, just a helpful starting point to discuss experience design in a more collaborative way. Now, I will say that it is helpful as a speaker to know, again, how many people are going to be in the room, because there are different types of intimacy and connection that keynote speakers or workshop speakers will make in their experience that they're creating. So if your room size is huge, but you've got people in little pockets in the room, you've got maybe different stages in your main area that you're having the conference, that's going to be a lot different than if you were to have them all connected in one space. And there have been so many conferences that I've been a part of that have changed it up, that have made it a really cool creative set for their main stage room that has worked really, really well with workshops, but maybe not so well with keynotes. So just talking through that design with the speaker will help them to understand, okay, so I need to be 360. I need to be talking to this corner, that back corner. I'm getting off the stage, I'm moving around. It's going to make it a more dynamic experience, not just for the speaker, but also for the audience, which brings me to movement, which is the next piece. Is your speaker going to move? Are they going to interact with your audience? Of course, we hope yes, because we want it to be engaging. But also, is this an accessible experience for everybody? So I know, we've been talking about creating accessible spaces for our industry, especially I've seen so many great conversations around this year at our industry shows. We want to make sure that every single person feels involved and included. So the speaker understanding what the room is going to look like, if there have been some design changes that have been made to meet the needs of certain audience members, that's great for us to know too, so that we're making sure that we're being inclusive of every single person in the room. On the speaker side, it's also important that we have our accessibility needs met. So a little bit of a nightmare story. There is this wonderful, wonderful leader who has spoken at different industry conferences, and she is in a wheelchair. And the topic that she speaks on is accessibility and creating spaces that are accessible to all, and how to do that from a planning standpoint. She attended one of our industry conferences to deliver this workshop and share this information with everyone. And when she got to her workshop room, there was no way for her to get on stage. So it's also important to think about the speakers, because that compromises the speaker's ability to be able to do their job, but also feel like it's a space that was designed for them and with them. So always ask your speakers too, are there any special needs or preferences that you have in terms of how you're going to be getting on and off the stage? Those questions matter as well. And then lastly, on the event design side, it's important to have conversations around AV tech requirements versus preferences. So a lot of times in a rider or in a contract for a speaker, they'll list these things out, but they may not be aware that you have certain things available for them to use that you've always used in the past, whether it's different types of monitors, different types of prompters. So having a conversation around, okay, what are you used to? What do you typically use? What do you prefer to use? This is what we have. Being more open about that instead of just depending on a contract to say, okay, we've checked these boxes and now we're good, versus making it a more collaborative event design opportunity to make it the best experience possible for the speaker and for the audience. Okay, so we're getting into some exciting stuff here. How do you maximize ROI for your AV and event technology? Now, it is no question that AV and technology are very, very pricey line items. And I know that that's going to be a heavy line item on the budget, and you don't want to take it away, because it does change the game a lot of times in terms of what the vibe is, how the experience feels. So I have some advice from a speaker standpoint on what is worth investing in and what may not actually be worth the money. First and foremost, before we get into that, it is so important to ask yourself the question, am I investing in the scalability and the growth of my event? So when you're looking at technology, is this going to expand the awareness, the brand awareness of my event, expand the reach of the content that we're actually producing and sharing at this event? Or is this more of a limited experience where we have the conference, it's a day, it's 3 days, it's done, and there's no content to be shared. So asking yourself the question, is my technology, what I'm spending the most money on a lot of times, is it increasing the reach, and is it scaling my event for the future? Second question that you want to ask is, am I prioritizing engagement? Because engagement really does need to be the top priority when it comes to an experience. Every single person needs to feel connected to something during that conference. Is the event and the technology that I'm spending this money on, this AV and this tech, is this creating a more engaging experience? And if so, I need to prioritize that, because that is one of the most important objectives of this particular conference. And then finally, just a little piece of advice that I've learned along the way as a speaker too, check everything. If you're going to spend the money on all of this event tech, you're going to want to check literally everything, including your speakers. Now, a lot of times speakers that are well prepared, that have years, decades of experience, will either know that, yes, I need to check every single thing, my deck, the mic, walking around on stage, or they may come from the other side where it's like, I've done this all the time. I don't really need to go through, a rehearsal. I don't need to check. You do need to check. A lot of times the stage will feel different for a speaker when they're actually on it. They're moving around. The lights are different. Sometimes the lights are too bright. They can't see their slides. So check the sound, check the lighting, check the staging, check everything for your speaker if you're going to spend that money. Now, let's get to the good stuff. So what AV and tech is worth spending money on versus what is maybe not so much. So I'm going to go with the biggest items first. Sound. Yes, you need a high quality sound system. If you're going to spend all this money to bring in a speaker, you want to make sure that they can actually be heard by the audience and that they're having a good experience and that they're not caught off guard by different issues that are happening with the sound during their presentation. Second to that is lighting. Yes, it makes a difference with stage design, but it also makes a difference in how the speaker can perform. So if the room has really bright lights and it's, the lights are too high, whatever's happening, and they're meant to be creating this really emotional, intimate moment for the audience, it just doesn't work. It doesn't match the vibe. So having that conversation of what does the experience feel like? What do you want it to feel like from a speaker perspective, but also making sure you're investing in that lighting. We need to be heard and we need to be seen. Of course, Wi-Fi, I don't even need to get into that because Wi-Fi is probably one of the most important things that you can depend on during a conference, and free Wi-Fi does not do the trick. Large, high-res screens also make a difference. So if you have this amazing speaker, this amazing presentation, but the screens are so small that people can't actually really see what's happening, or the screens are positioned in a way where the speaker's body is blocking the screens, it's going to be a waste of your money. So understanding where the speaker's going, what the design is going to be, and making sure that it's a crystal clear experience for the audience, important. I also think it's very, very worth spending some cash, just a little bit of cash, on floor monitors. So give the speaker the opportunity to have something in front of them so that they're not always having to go off of memory or look behind them to see what's on their slides, because it distracts from the overall experience for the speaker, which then affects the audience's interpretation of what's happening and what energy the speaker is giving out. It's helpful to have interactive audience tools. And again, this goes back to the question of what are your stakeholder objectives? If engagement is one of those things, if you've used tools in the past, amazing. If you're looking for ideas, ask the speaker, what have you used before that's worked really, really well with this particular presentation, or maybe with another one that you've done? Now, of course, most of us have probably tested the waters on hybrid platforms, and hybrid surprised me a little bit. It stuck around, and I wasn't sure what would happen after we transitioned from virtual only during the pandemic into this hybrid model and now mostly in person. But hybrid actually has stuck around, and I think that's because it's proven such great value in terms of expanding the reach of the event, and again, focusing on that scalability and that accessibility for the event's growth and for your audience's engagement or your members' engagement. Now, I know that hybrid can be complicated. It can require double the attention, double the staff, double the time, sometimes a lot more cash. So I understand that sometimes it doesn't fit in the budget, and that's okay. What I always try to recommend is a plan B, which in this case would be video recording and production. There are so many opportunities to capture content at your conference and repurpose it for later on. So if you've spent all this money for this keynote to come on stage, You've got them for 45 minutes. They knock it out of the park. The audience loves them. And that's it. What a shame. What a wasted opportunity. If we had recorded the session, not just to maybe have our members and our customers watch on demand later, which is great. That's amazing too. But if we don't take it and splice the content up, if we've got a little bit of extra budget to produce, to edit a couple of videos for social media, for our members, to put in newsletters, that takes the investment that you've spent in this speaker so much further. And the speaker loves it because they get to reshare it on their social media channels too. Furthermore, expanding the reach of your brand. And then lastly, I'll say that there are some really amazing speaker and presentation management tools. I know that Cadmium has Event Scribe, which is a great option to check out. It offers multiple tools for speaker and presentation management, including a management portal for the speaker and also a speaker-ready system, among other things. So the team will share a little bit more at the end of this session about that, but that is also something that is incredibly valuable and makes a big difference in the experience that your speaker has. Okay, so we're getting toward the end of the session here, but I don't want to spend any less time on speaker content because I think that a lot of times we have this initial conversation, we have this discovery call with their speaker, we think we're good to go, and there is a huge gap in time between the initial call and when that speaker is actually stepping on stage, where we're really not talking at all. So what I'm going to recommend to you is a couple of different tips to really make sure that you are on the same page with the cadence of the content and also what the content is going to look like when it's going to be delivered. So a few tips and tricks just to get us started here. First and foremost, if your organization has brand standards that you're going to require the speaker to abide by, that needs to be communicated as soon as humanly possible because every single speaker is going to have their own deck. So if you need that deck to fit into certain brand guidelines, whether it's as little as a title slide that you want them to use, or it's as much as the font needs to be this size, it needs to be in this text, it needs to be this color. I've had clients that have wanted all different things across the spectrum. And of course, again, as a speaker, I want to do everything right by you. I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that you expect and that you need. So if there are brand standards in place, share them with the speaker up front. But I will add a caveat and an ask to that as well. If it's not necessary for the speaker to have the exact same font as your company's brand standards, please don't ask them to do it because it's so much more work for the speaker to go through every single graphic that they've ever designed or had a designer put together for them and change every single thing on every single slide. So if you don't need it, don't ask for it. And feel free to say it's a nice to have, not a need to have, though we're probably mostly overachievers, so we're probably going to do it for you anyway. But communicate those brand standards up front right away. Second is to communicate your stakeholder objectives early. So in that first discovery call, hopefully you've got some of those objectives defined. These really are the metrics that we're going to be looking at as speakers to say, yes, we've done the job, or no, we haven't done the job well. So if you're looking for a specific outcome, let us know and let's talk about it. Let's reiterate it. Let's make sure it wasn't just a one-off conversation, but that I'm going to deliver exactly what you're looking for. And then we've talked a little bit about engagement already, but how do you typically engage with the audience? And what's your expectation as the client, as my client, of me in terms of engagement? How much time do you want them talking to each other? I have the way that I typically do it. This is what I would normally do. And this is what I can do if we want to change things up a little bit for your audience for this particular show. For the speaker deck, this is also a wide spectrum. And I know that I don't think I've ever had anybody say to me, this is what the norm is as a planner or as a speaker for when they're getting their deck to you. I recommend that you set the expectation, and again, set it early on, but set the expectation that you would like to have the speaker's deck 1 week prior to the event. If you ask a speaker for their deck too early, they are probably going to be a little bit disconnected from the content. For me personally, and everybody prepares differently, I want to be laser focused before I go into this event. So that content is fresh. I built it last week. I've rehearsed it a few times. It's locked in, and there's nothing else that's on my plate or on my mind that's going to have me stray from that experience that I'm prepared to provide. So if you ask for it a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance, it's not top of mind for me anymore. And it's going to be, oh, okay, now I have to rehearse what I built 2-3 months ago. It also doesn't provide speakers the flexibility to make changes or feel like they can make changes. So a lot of times I'll be rehearsing through my deck and I'm like, ooh, I want to flip that slide with this one. It just makes more sense. It's going to be a better experience for me and therefore the audience. So ask for it a week ahead. Still leaves you plenty of breathing room if they need to change things. And of course, they can ask to change things, a couple days out if they need to, but it gives that appropriate amount of time for a speaker to keep it fresh and relevant, but also get it to you in a timely fashion as well. And then finally, we talked a little bit about pre and post materials for the presentation. So if there is something that you want the speaker to provide before the event or after the event, or the speaker would like to provide that, that's something to make sure that you keep in mind when you're looking at content management for the speaker. Okay, so we're getting to the very end. We've got a couple more things here, and then we're going to go into Q&A. One of the last things we're going to talk about is feedback. So really what I wanted to share with you today is what the ideal feedback would be from a speaker perspective that I would want to receive from you after the conference. And from the planner perspective, this is the feedback that you can expect from the speaker, that you can feel free to ask the speaker to better understand if they had a great experience, if there are things they'd recommend changing for the next year, whatever that may be. From the planner side, the feedback that I would love to see as a speaker is any sort of quantified engagement. So if you are using any sort of engagement tools, how many people participated in this poll? What was the outcome of this survey? How many people were doing whatever it was? If you can quantify what the audience was doing during that presentation, that helps the speaker understand in real time as much as possible where the audience was really involved and invested, and where they maybe dropped off a little bit so that we can make our content better. I would also say that any sort of qualified commentary is helpful as well. So what did they actually say? So outside of the data, what was their feedback? How did they feel? And again, that's one of the most important parts of creating an experience. So as a speaker, I want to know, like, were they excited? Were they motivated? Were they touched? Were they distracted? How did they actually feel during this presentation? Now, I will say, if you get a lot of feedback and you are only looking to share maybe, a few comments with the speaker, just generally to let them know what the audience was saying, there's always one person that's going to throw you a curveball piece of feedback. And every speaker experiences this pretty much every time they take the stage. There will always be one piece of feedback that just maybe doesn't fit with the rest, and it doesn't align with what your perspective was as a planner. 99% of the audience was saying something different, and it could be something that's positive, it could be something that's negative, but if there's an outlier in the commentary, it may or may not be worth sharing. So I would say use your judgment when you're sharing feedback with the speaker as well. What's most important for them to know? Not all information is going to be helpful information for the speaker. What did your stakeholders think? So outside of the audience, what did your team think? What did the executives at your company think? And then if you loved the speaker, and we're going to get into this in a second, are there opportunities where you can actually partner with a speaker to work with them again in a different way? Or can you refer me to somebody else in your network that you know is amazing? And then from the speaker side, I would love to share and would love to be asked the questions. What was that pre-event experience like? How was the communication, all of that content management? How was on-site support? Did you feel the room setup was aligned with what your experience was and what your vision was as a speaker, what your objectives as a speaker were? Did the AV tech give you any problems? How was your overall experience? Last thing that we're going to get into today before we close is talking about if you do fall in love with your speaker and you want to use them again. But as we know, we want to keep our content fresh. We don't want to be booking the same people, the same faces, definitely not the same topics from year to year. So if you love a speaker, what do you do with them? Do you get to use them again, or do you have to wait, 2-3 years before you can bring them back to your conference? I will tell you that based on my experience with clients, when this happens, there are so many creative ways to be able to partner together beyond just saying, I'm so happy to hear that, and I would refer this person for you next year because I know they're amazing too and they'll do you justice. These are the ways that you can work with a speaker beyond just that one thing. Articles, blogs, and social media. If your speaker writes or they create content, can they put together something for your group? Can they do a monthly blog, a quarterly blog on different topics for you to continue that thought leadership and that leadership development process? Can they lead a webinar for your team internally or for your customers or teach a masterclass? Is there opportunity for them to do some one-on-one coaching with their teams? These are all things that I've done with my clients that I've had really great experiences with. Maybe they also do MC work. Maybe you have a holiday party that you want to pull in your speaker and have them moderate some of these different sessions, these awards galas. If they do that type of work and you love their vibe, they really connected with your audience, bring them back in that way. Do they have e-learning modules, or do you internally where they can come and be a guest star, or they can collaborate with you on creating some internal resources? And can they be a brand ambassador for you? Are there certain ways to engage them in different types of events that you're hosting where they kind of become this common thread for the company, a little bit of a face and also a personality to expand your brand's reach? So that is so much information. Again, this is going to be shared with you in the next 48 hours. So you'll have the recording, you'll have the slides. Hopefully this was really valuable for you today. I am a firm believer that we get so much more done when we talk, when we share, when we learn from each other. So my hope for you today is that this truly was an experience for you where you found at least a couple things that you can ask your speakers, that you can prepare differently, that you can go back and think about a little bit more deeply. So with that, I will say thank you. We're going to get into Q&A for the next final few minutes. Amanda, I will welcome you back on the virtual stage and let you go ahead and facilitate some of those questions.
Thank you so much, Courtney. So basically, I'm going to Courtney-Stanley.com and signing up for coaching. And in all seriousness, that was amazing. I am wowed when I think about all of the elements and pieces that it takes to create not only a successful event, but then set up your vendors, especially like your speakers with their content, to set them up for success. And it's really kind of wild to see it all laid out in such a way. So thank you so much for including so many great little nuggets of information. There's definitely a lot to think about, and I think you gave our audience a really, really great foundation for the next time they work with speakers.
My
All right,
pleasure.
so we'll do some questions here in just a second. If anyone has any remaining question you want to ask, now's the time. Enter it so we can make sure we're able to answer it. And I want to just share to that end of trying to stay organized and trying to make sure your event is a success and your speakers are a success. I have found that that's one of the more difficult areas that I struggle with as an event manager. So I wanted to point out that, and you mentioned it, Courtney, Cadmium's different event scribe solutions, especially the speaker and management tool. I've used it and it's like revolutionary. So I could geek out and go on about it, but I know we're short on time, so I will save you all from that. We'll send out some information right after the webinar so that you'll have access to that quickly and easily, and hopefully you'll be able to check it out. So let's see, our first question here. This is a good one. So how much promotion can we ask a speaker to help with?
So I would say, based on my experience, I think that it is reasonable to ask a speaker to at least record a video, so a promotional video, getting the audience hyped up for the event, and then share it on social, reshare on social. You can ask them for the sun and the stars and just see what they'll come back with. But I think at minimum, it's fine to ask for a promotional video and some social media love.
Gotcha. That's really great to know. I know sometimes it feels a little bit awkward, like how much can we get here?
Yes.
So
and
it's really good.
Oh,
Awesome.
there's a way to ask, I would say, where it's not so much like, are you willing to do any promotional work? But it's, do you typically offer any promotional opportunities where you'll help get the message out that you're coming. So it's more of a partnership thing than an ask. And for a speaker, I mean, I always want to do that because it's like, yeah, like I want to connect with your audience, want them to be excited. And I also, it gives me social content too. So I'm happy to do it.
Awesome. Love that. Okay. Thank you. Another quick question here. And I know that we talked a little bit about when you're working with the budget and knowing money up front and asking the hard questions. This question specifically asks about booking a speaker for multiple events. Is it fair to ask for a discount?
Yes. So when it comes to booking multiple events, so let's say that a speaker, they were great, you loved them, or you know that you're going to have 3 different road shows throughout the year. It's absolutely fair to ask if there's any sort of wiggle room if you're going to be hiring them multiple times. And I have had this situation happen before where I've had a client say, okay, we would like to have you for 3 events throughout the year. What is your rate? And I will often say, this is my standard rate for a one-off, because if we're booking these 3 events, so it's not always because, but if we're going to be working together these 3 times, I'll discount it by 20%. So a lot of times it's a benefit to the speaker too, so that they're not hiring somebody else to do that second and third event. So a lot of speakers will be happy to give a special rate to book more business with the client.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you. All right, so here's another question we have from Brianna. Brianna. Okay, as a speaker, how do you feel about speaker contracts to ensure the speaker meets our deadlines, expectations, and can this scare speakers away?
No, it would not scare a speaker away. And I think the more information that's laid out in terms of expectations, the better. So I would say if you've got a project timeline, give it to us. And absolutely, we can sign off on it very much the same way as our expectation is to have a deposit by this date, final payment by this date. It's the same thing. It's just a shared expectation that you're both acknowledging.
Gotcha. Okay, wonderful. All right, any last questions? I'll keep an eye out here for just a moment. I have one that I'll go ahead and ask. This might be our last. What type of post-event resources do speakers typically offer audiences, and should they be expected each time?
I would say no, they should not be expected each time, because I think that each presentation is different. So if it's something that's a little bit more motivational, aspirational, that's probably not going to be the same. And same if you're doing kind of a fireside chat with a big name speaker, they're not going to be providing a post-event resource. But I would say in terms of what you could expect, if that is something that makes sense to include with that presentation, is any sort of material that's going to help continue the learning after the event happens. So for example, I may give a list of questions for a leader to take back to their teammates to use in a one-on-one check-in with them to make sure that the relationship is healthy, that there's trust there. What am I doing, that may not be perceived the same way as I think it's being perceived. So having some of those resources to lean on that you heard about during a presentation, but then can pull back up and utilize with your team, those are the types of things that a speaker might give away. Of course, there are always, books, ebooks, different things that they'll give to you too, assessments that you can take. But I think, having the conversation with the speaker and asking, does it make sense? Is this something you do? And just trusting that the speaker knows what's best for their content is helpful. If you want something additional, then say that too. And speakers can always get a little bit creative.
Wonderful. Thank you. Oh my gosh, Courtney, thank you so much. This has been great. You really did dig deep into so many of these things that are related to success of speakers and managing content, etc. I am blown away by how you did that in the amount of time you had.
Me too. I'm like sweating
very, very much.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like there was a lot of content here. I knew that it would be, robust, but there was a lot to get through. So my pleasure. And again, my hope to the audience is that you all took away some really valuable tips here.
Absolutely. Thank you again. And I'll just do a quick little plug here for Courtney. If you would like to interact with her, the best way to do that is by going to her LinkedIn page. Here is her QR code again. I definitely recommend following her. If you haven't listened to her podcast, Dare to Interrupt, go right now. It's really, really good. And it goes beyond just event management and speaker management. It goes into like self-care. So it's really, really great. I highly recommend it. And Courtney has been very kind to share her personal email with us. So if you want to reach out to her directly, you can do so at Courtney at courtney-stanley.com. All right. And one last thing, again, I mentioned that I'll follow up with an email. I will include some resources there. I will include information on Courtney, kind of the same information we have here, but just so it's easy to get to. And we'll also provide information on the tools that Cadmium has, our speaker and content management tools that are fantastic for all the things that Courtney spoke about. You'll be notified when the archive video is available. And again, that will be in just the next couple of days at most. Please be sure again after to check out the 3-question survey and provide us any feedback you would like. We're always open to hearing all the things, good, bad, otherwise, suggestions on topics. We love to hear from you. Thank you. And finally, this program is copyright 2024 by Cadmium with all rights reserved. This concludes the program. Have a wonderful day, and you may now disconnect. Bye.